I can write down to answer at the end or right now. None yet? Okay. We will have questions, so we'll come back to that, okay? All right, is everybody able to see my loop right here? My contract loop?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go into the financed sales contract. That is where we will be working. Now we have 3 main contracts in our area. 1 is the finance sales contract. 2 is the cash sales contract. And 3 is the land sales contract, meaning if you are selling a piece of raw land, that is what you would use. If there is no house on it, no trailer on it, no nothing on it, you would use the land sales contract. If you have a cash buyer, you would be using the cash sales contract. The reason that we teach the finance sales contract is because that is what 90% of the contracts are in our area. Now, with that being said, cash has become very common. But if you can fill out a finance sales contract, you can fill out a cash sales contract. Make sense? It's the same exact thing, except it is cash instead of financing. That's it. That's the only difference. All right, so we're going to get started under finance sales contract. The top line, we have Betty Buyer. That is going to be your purchaser's name. Easy peasy. Just write in your purchaser's name. The second line is the seller's name. Now, you might not know the seller, so where do you find their name? There's a couple of different ways that you can find their name. The first way is to look on the MLS. When you look on the MLS, it should have the owner's name listed on the MLS. Number 2, you can go to tax records. If you are in MLS, if you're in Paragon, there is a button over to the right that says tax. You hit that and there's a drop down button that has all the counties on it. So if you're in Madison County, choose Madison County. If you're in Limestone, DeKalb, Morgan, all of that. Okay, so you can go to tax records. You can either type in the address or the parcel number, which is also on the MLS. You can type in either one and you can actually see the owner's name. Okay, so that is where you would put the seller. One thing that I like to note about sellers, if it's 2 people, you can never assume that it's a husband and wife. Okay, so if it's Sally seller and Billy seller, if it says Sally and Billy seller on the deed or on the tax records, you make them 2 people in this contract. So you put Sally seller and Billy seller. Does that make sense? Because in .loop, everybody is their own person. So we want to make sure that we distinguish the different people. Okay. So we have Betty Buyer and Sally seller. I came up with that. So original. Now we're going to type in the address. One thing that I have seen on the finance sales contracts within the last year is if there is a direction. So if you have a 133 Freedom Way Southeast or 133 Freedom Way Northwest or whatever, if it's at the end of the address, make sure you put that into the finance sales contract on the address. If there is a direction, please put that in there. Not every one of them has it. This one actually does not. But if you find on tax records that it is listed as whatever, southeast, southwest, whatever it is, put that in there. I have seen lenders flag that and make us go back and do an addendum later. And it's just kind of aggravating to have to go through and do an addendum. So if you would just do that for me. On the address. Now, you can find that in the MLS. You can find that in tax records. Either one, just make sure. always, always double check when it says lot. Okay, so you just put the address, the city, the county. Be very careful with county because there's a lot of times that we have Limestone County, but it is Madison City. So make sure that we do have the county correct on there. You might want to double check it through tax records. The county, state, zip. When we get to lot, always verify that the lot that is on the MLS is the same as listed on the tax records. Sold a house one time and we got to the closing and we actually were signing the deed, and the seller of that house looked at the deed that he was signing over to the purchaser and realized that his lot was not correct. They did not have a correct lot on the deed. That was a problem. We had to get that corrected. It was not good. So make sure that the lot on MLS that's listed and the lot on tax records are the same thing. Just make sure. We also have a lot and block subdivision. So if it has a lot and a block, it doesn't always have a block. Block is usually like 1, 2, 3. You're not going to get high numbers in a block. Then you're going to have a subdivision. If it is not in a subdivision, then it is considered meets and bounds. So right here where it says Liberty Knoll, we would just put meets and bounds. And we would put NA in this block as well. Okay. It's either in a subdivision with lot and block or it's meets and bounds. That's the only two things that you're going to have right there. Okay. I'm going to turn this back so I don't forget about it. All right. Legal description. If there is not a legal description in the MLS, there is a legal description in tax records. It's not as important if it's a lot and block, but it's very important to add the legal description in if it's a on tax records, if it's meets and bounds, because that will say something like 500-foot northwest corner, and give coordinates. And so you want to add those coordinates in the legal description on the contract from tax records if it's meets and bounds. Don't stress about it if it's a subdivision. Okay, lot and block, not a problem. All right, moving on. Sorry, I'm going to check the chat box. I am so bad about forgetting the chat box. All right, so the next section is a little bit of math. Not much, just a little bit. So the first thing that we go over is the purchase price. That is the purchase price that your purchaser is willing to pay for the property. Okay. That would be what would go in that top blank. The second one is the earnest money. Now, this is where I'm going to ask a few questions. Who can tell me what earnest money means? What is it?
It's a down payment. It's a payment that the buyer is going to pay, which will go towards their closing. But it's basically a good faith. They put it down to secure their offer.
Perfect. That's exactly what it is. It is a good faith. Is it a guarantee that they are going to get the house?
Absolutely not.
No. Is it a guarantee that if they decide to not buy the house after going under contract, that they get it back?
No, absolutely not.
Right. So is it a standard amount?
Typically, it's $1,000 or 1% of the sale price.
Correct. Is it required?
No.
No. So when the market turns, eventually, it's going to be a really long time before we come to that again. But when the market does turn and we are now in a buyer's market instead of a seller's market, you will start seeing deals come together with zero earnest money. And that is, it's scary, but the sellers are desperate at that point when we do get to that shift, that they'll basically take whatever. If somebody's looking at their house, they're like, come on, we'll take it. Whereas right now, buyers are just throwing out crazy earnest money numbers. I have seen more earnest money numbers higher this year than 2,500 than in my last 12 years. And I say this year, I mean last year. We're in January. Come on. Last year. So we are seeing that number creep up there. However, just because your buyer is willing to give $5,000 earnest money, I want you to realize that does not mean that it's a guarantee that they're going to get the property. That does not mean that a seller is going to choose their offer over another offer just because their earnest money is higher. Now, does it show good faith that they are very interested? Absolutely. I would encourage you guys to stay around the 1% mark though. Don't creep up there too high. If you're putting in an offer on a $150,000 house, there's no need to do a $5,000 earnest money. There's just really, it's not going to benefit your buyer any more than $2,000 earnest money. Okay. So just be aware of that. If it's a $500,000 house though, bump up that earnest money amount. Don't do $1,000 on a $500,000 deal. That's not enough in today's market. So that's just a few things about earnest money. A few more things about earnest money is it is not made out to you as the agent. Make sure that the earnest money is always made out to Keller Williams Realty or Keller Williams Realty Madison. It must be made out to the broker. Okay? Trust me, you do not want earnest money. You also cannot take cash for earnest money. Do not ever take cash. You can take a money order. You can take a personal check. You can take wired funds, which if you need directions on taking wired funds in .loop, Jill uploaded a wired fund transfer directions on how to do that, our bank number and all of that. Just be aware that there is a $10 fee on the buyer end that they have to add $10 to their earnest money because that is what our bank charges us for that wire. Okay. So just be aware that we can wire earnest money funds. We just have to have that $10 extra on there. Also, if you take earnest money and you hold it in your desk for 2 months, but your closing's, the next week. So you turn it in a week before your closing, Jill is probably going to come after you, just so you know. Once we have earnest money in hand, do not hold it. We are to turn it in to the broker within 48 hours of having it in our hand. Okay. Not saying that it's going to be super important for you to turn it in within that 48 hours. It is a good idea so you don't forget about it. You're not going to get fined more than likely if you don't. But what we don't want to have is go to closing or even get really close to closing and realize that the earnest money was never deposited. And then you as the agent find it in your desk drawer. I've been there. I've done that. Don't do that. That's not a fun conversation to have with your MCA. Jill will be very upset with you if you do that. Okay. So everybody's done it before, but just remember, as soon as you get earnest money, turn that into the office. You don't have to have a contract to have earnest money held by the office. There is a sheet by the mailboxes that you fill out. It's the contract sheet. And instead of like choosing the contract that you have, you can actually choose for the earnest money to be on hold versus deposited. So if you ever get a check and say you have a buyer, especially now when buyers have to put in multiple offers on multiple properties, what I always explain to them is say, hey, we're going to go ahead and write our earnest money check up front for $1,000, $2,000, whatever it is, when we write the first contract. And we're going to hold it in our office. It's not going to be deposited, but it's going to be held until we do get a contract. And then once we get a contract, I'll turn the contract in and then it will be deposited. That's just a little bit easier way to keep up with it, because that way the office can hold it and be responsible for it versus you driving around in your car with it in your console, just waiting for them to get a contract. It could be a month before that happens. So, and then do you know how much stuff gets thrown in a console in a month? I mean, my car, a lot. So let's not hold earnest money when we get it. Does anybody have any specific questions about earnest money that I can help answer before we go further? Good. Okay. So the top line is the purchase price. The second line is the earnest money. Now, right here, you can see that's the type of loan. You need to know the type of loan that your purchaser is getting in order to fill out a finance sales contract. That would be on their pre-approval letter. So if their pre-approval letter says conventional 3% down, they're getting a conventional loan. If it says FHA 3.5% down, FHA loan. If it says VA, it's a VA loan. Okay. So look at their pre-approval letter, and that's the type of loan that they'll be getting. Now, question that I get a lot is, okay, Keegan, they say they're getting a conventional 3% loan. However, they decided that they want a conventional 10% down loan whenever we get under contract. Can you do that? Answer is yes, you can do that. The correct way to do that, not every time does this happen, but the correct way to do that is to do an addendum changing the amount down for the loan. Some lenders don't require that, okay? However, if you're going from a conventional loan to now an FHA loan, that is a big difference, okay? And I can tell you that could cause issues because FHA is health and safety related. So there's a lot of things that a conventional loan would be passed over on health and safety wise that an FHA would be flagged. So just be aware that if something does change or they change the amount that they're putting down on the loan, you are supposed to do an addendum changing that. I would say it's not as big of a deal if they're doing conventional and they're doing, you know, a conventional product, 3%, 5%, 10%, 20%, not going to make a difference for the seller. But if you do switch that over to a different type of loan, that could potentially cause bigger issues for the seller. So just so you know. So the third line that we're going to talk about is going to be the loan amount. That is where you put their loan amount. So you take their purchase price and then you take however much they're going to put down, minus that out, and that would be their loan amount. Okay. The fourth line is their down payment. Now, I always think these are flip-flopped. It should be down payment and then your loan amount. But on here, it is loan amount and down payment. We do not do any subtraction on this form. So you are literally stating what the earnest money is, stating what the loan amount is, and stating what the down payment is. Now, Nina was right. And whenever you do have earnest money, it does come off that closing cost or that down payment. And so if their down payment is $13,000 and their earnest money is $1,000, it could end up making that $1,000 less. However, on here, we do not do any math whatsoever. We just literally put the numbers on here. We do all the math on the estimated closing statement. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that? Good? Okay. All right. Now, next thing, we're going to talk about the working days to make a diligent and good faith effort to obtain approval. Right here should be 3 to 5 working days. You can put 3, you can put 5, you can put 4, whatever. I like it to be between 3 and 5 working days. And that just gives them time to make application. If they are trying to shop rates, that gives them a little bit of time to be able to shop the best rate before they have to make application. Okay. For FHA and VA loans, you will need a separate addendum. So you'll need an FHA VA disclosure addendum, and that is going to be in the .loop additional contract docs folder. It's additional contract docs folder, and you will find that, and it's an FHA/VA disclosure. You must have that if you are doing an FHA or a VA. Let's talk about settlement charges. Settlement charges are the purchaser's charges in order to get a loan. Hear what I said. They are the purchaser's charges. Depending on what kind of market you are in, depending on if you are buying a new home or a resale home or whatnot, you can ask for the seller to cover some of your purchaser's settlement charges. Now, in this market, if you are brand new, I'm going to just tell you, you're probably not going to get any closing cost or settlement charges paid by the seller, unless it is pretty far out or you bump up the price to cover it, or you're buying a new home and you're going with their preferred lender. Okay? You're probably not going to get a whole lot, if any, closing costs. In a buyer's market, that number would be anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000 on average. That's the biggest difference. Okay. If you want to know what settlement charges are, how much they are, ask the lender. That is your best choice right there. You also can go into the estimated closing statement Excel spreadsheet that is on MLS. If you log on to Paragon and you go to MLS documents, the estimated closing statement spreadsheet is on there, or you can download the Brodo app. So it looks like this. Hang on. Let me get it. Called Palm One Agent. And this is what it looks like. Oh gosh, I hit something. So it's called Brodo One. And it gives you like all of your fee. You can put in all of your fees right there. You can even add the address of the house, and it goes ahead and adds the tax rate from tax records. It's pretty amazing. I love it. I use it all the time. If you are interested in it, if you are interested in doing that, then email Sarah Parvin at sarah@brodowski.com. She's with Capital Title, she's not with Capital Title. She's with Brodowski McCurry, our attorneys. And if you are interested, I'm going to go ahead and put her email in the chat box before I forget. Brodo app, contact Sarah Parvin at sarah@brodowski.com. Honestly, she has now can everybody see that, or did I just make that private? I think I just made that private. Good job, Keegan. Brodowski.com. Okay. Come on. Brodo. And I can't remember what it's either called Brodo app or it's either Palm One Agents. I'm typing it. Sorry. Contact Sarah at. And I do think it's a like $13 a year charge for that Brodo app. I'm telling you, it is completely worth it. I use it all the time. Not only can you use it on the buyer side, you can use it on the seller side. And there's even a multiple offer situation thing that you can go in there and figure out calculators. And it has so many tools with it. I absolutely love it. So I've been using it for several years now. And I absolutely love it. The one thing that's new is like you can actually go in and type in the address of the property and it will automatically pull the taxes from tax records for that property. So that's a huge, huge selling point because your buyer always wants to know when you're out, they always want to say, well, how much would the payment be on this house? And you're going, hang on, let me try to figure that out for you. This actually helps you with that. So I encourage all of you, if you don't have that app downloaded, email Sarah. She can help you get it downloaded. It's a fantastic product. All right, next. So I put 0, obviously, in the settlement charges thing here. That is up to you. If your purchaser is asking for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, you would put that in there. I would just go ahead and have a talk with your buyers right now to make sure they understand it's not the norm for sellers to be paying for closing costs. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Next thing down, we're going to just hit survey really, really quickly. You do not need a survey if it is a lot and block subdivision. However, if you are buying raw land, if you are buying a house that has acreage, if you are buying a house that's meets and bounds, but it doesn't really have a whole lot of acreage, but it's not in a subdivision, I would ask for a current survey or make sure your buyer sets up to get one done. You want a survey that's within 2 years. So no matter what, you really want a survey that's current within 2 years. So just my little 2 cents. You don't have to have a survey at any point, but it is recommended, especially if you're going to be selling acreage or land. All right, we're going to skip down to closing and possession. Closing right now, it takes 30 to 45 days to get closed. Really depends on the type of product that they're getting as far as loan wise. If they're getting a VA loan, it could end up taking just a little bit longer to get that loan. With the appraisers being backed up and all of that, it could take a little bit longer. So normal is 30 to 45 days. So whatever date it is, you just click here and hit 30 to 45 days. Possession is to be given at closing. Now, there is a thing called retention of possession where the seller can stay in the house after the closing, and there is an occupancy agreement where the purchaser can move in the house before the purchase happens. However, we don't go over that in this class. I can hit it in Contracts 2 in March. We really discourage you to do that. Right now, we're not seeing a whole lot of that. We're definitely not seeing occupancy agreements. If anything, we might see some retention agreements for 24 to 48 hours. Like, for example, I'll give you why you would want a retention agreement. My mother-in-law sold her home in October. She was buying a new one, and my husband's grandmother is 93 years old. It's very, very hard to expect a 93-year-old woman to move out of her house and move into a new one the same day. I mean, that's a lot of stress. So we ended up negotiating a 48-hour first right of refusal, 48-hour retention of possession, to where they would have enough time to close on the house, go buy the new house, and then get the movers the next day and get out. So that would be one of the situations where a retention of possession does come into play. I've also seen retention of possession when someone buys a house and say the sellers are building a house and it's not quite done yet, and they ask to be able to rent it back for a month or 2 months. I've seen that as well. It's discouraged. You never really want to go down that rabbit hole if you don't have to, but sometimes it is necessary. I've had several investors that are buying houses that end up agreeing to let the seller rent it back in a retention of possession, and it's worked out fairly well. I've also had a couple of situations for retention of possession that has not worked out well. So I'm not going to go over those here, but just be aware that it is something that you can run into. It's just not encouraged to use. We want to try to do same day closings as much as possible. Closing and moving, all of that stuff. All right, agency disclosure. This is basically a glorified RECAD that is inside our contract. So as right now, you can see I put Keller Williams on both sides, and we are acting as a limited consensual dual agent. So if it were RE/MAX on one side and Keller Williams on the other, it would be RE/MAX as the seller or purchaser, whichever side they're representing, and Keller Williams as the seller or purchaser, whichever side they're representing. It does not matter if it's Keller Williams Madison, Keller Williams Huntsville, Keller Williams Birmingham, Keller Williams Anniston, Keller Williams Coleman. If Keller Williams is on the other side, it is limited consensual dual no matter what. It is still the same brokerage overall. Okay. So just know that that's going to be limited consensual dual, even if it's someone that's not in your office. All right, there's 2 paragraphs that are super important in here. Number 1 is paragraph 4A. That's the condition of the property. That says that the seller agrees to deliver all the appliances, heating, cooling, electrical, gas, plumbing, septic systems in normal operating condition. Normal operating condition, okay? That does not mean refrigerator, because the refrigerator is not a built-in appliance, okay? So if it is built in, it is expected to be working and in normal operating condition. Next is lead-based paint disclosure. We only talk about lead-based paint if it's pre-1978, okay? The next part is my biggest pet peeve on contracts, and I'm going to teach you guys to do it correctly. So if it's lead-based paint pre-1978, so the house was built in 1950, you would put 10, 5, and 5 in these blanks, okay? If it's post 1978, you just put NA, 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 okay? But where the important part is are these 2 right here, top or bottom. This is not a they initial both type thing. This is either they initial the top or they initial the bottom. They are going to initial the top if it is post 1978 construction. So if the house was built after 1978, you're going to click today's date, and they're going to initial the top one, and you're going to go in and remove the initials on the bottom one so they don't initial it. If it is pre-1978, they will not initial the top one. They will go in and initial the bottom one. Okay, so it's not a they initial both right there. It is they either initial the top or they initial the bottom. Again, the top is post 1978. If it was built after 1978, they initial the top. If it is pre-1978, they initial the bottom. You also must have a lead-based paint addendum if it is pre-1978. You must have a lead-based paint addendum, okay? So the 2 addendums that we've talked about so far is if it's a FHA or a VA contract, you must have a FHA or VA disclosure. And then if it's a lead-based paint, pre-1978 construction home, you must have a lead-based paint disclosure. And both of those are in additional contract docs in .loop. All right, next is the Alabama Wood Infestation Report. If they are getting a conventional loan, it is not required by all lenders to have a wood infestation report. So please check with the lender and ask up front, are they going to require a wood infestation report on this property? So that way you know to get it. You must have that report to the lender and to the attorney's office 7 days prior to closing. Otherwise, there could end up being delays. However, you cannot get it too early because it must be within 30 days to be accurate. So if you got it like the first week you were under contract, but you have a 45-day closing, it's going to be expired by the time your closing comes. So it must be within 30 days of that closing time period. Additional property inspection. They either do or do not want a property inspection. Now, the only time that you see does not want a property inspection most of the time is if it's an investment property. However, I have had several people want to drop that this year to give themselves a better chance at getting a house. Be very careful. If a client does not want a property inspection, please have a separate addendum to the contract written up that states that you as their agent recommended that they have a home inspection and they have declined, and get them to sign it, just to cover yourself, because we definitely don't want anything to come back on us like, oh, well, they told me it wasn't important to have a home inspection. No, we always recommend a home inspection. And if they absolutely will not do a home inspection, you get that addendum written up. That is an additional contract docs. It's also in the contract docs folder as well. You get that written up that says that you basically recommended that they get a home inspection and they declined. All right, going down, we're going to jump down. This is paragraph 9 right here. Whoop. Right here. Just circle it, read it, look at it, make sure that you understand it. Basically, it says if it's there and it's attached, it must stay, including all landscaping, mailboxes, TV wall mounts, the Bose surround system, any of that. If it is attached and it's not personal property meaning, you know, wall hangings or pictures or something like that. If it's not personal property, then it must remain with the property. Okay, it must remain. So read that really well. Make sure your buyer and seller, on top of that, if you're representing a seller, make sure they always understand that. It's always the dumbest thing too. It's always like, well, I wasn't going to leave my hydrangea bush that my great grandmother gave me. So if you know me, then you know how I feel about those. I don't like them. So the only person that probably doesn't like hydrangea bushes. All right, we're going to go all the way down to additional provisions. By no means does this mean that you have to add everything that's in this into your contract. It is not required. It is just some, hey, you might want to have this in there type thing. You don't have to have any of this in there. Number 1, home must appraise for purchase price or greater. I always put that in there unless they are waiving the appraisal. If they are waiving the appraisal in order to give themselves a head start in multiple offers, make sure that they understand that if it does not appraise, that they must pay for the difference. Okay, if they did want to retain something special, then number 1, you would want to make sure you put that on an addendum when a buyer is, when you're accepting an offer as a seller, you want a separate addendum with that. And then also, I always put it in the MLS, in the agent remarks. I'll always say curtains in bedroom 2 and 4 do not convey, to make sure that they understand that they absolutely do not stay. So it's okay if sellers take something, like if there's something that important to them that they're going to take. Obviously, the landscaping is a little hard to take up before you list it sometimes, unless you can put it in a pot somewhere. So just put it in the MLS. Also put it in your listing contract. And I would encourage you to have a separate addendum, or there's a personal property addendum in the additional contract docs. And I would fill out that personal property addendum and make sure that the buyer and seller both sign that they are both aware that that does not convey. Just so you don't have any surprises when you get to your final walkthrough and they freak out that, your seller took a bush. So, home must appraise for purchase price or greater. Always have that in there, of course, unless the purchaser is waiving that appraisal. Another thing you can ask for is a home warranty. I just put seller to provide a 1-year choice home warranty, not to exceed $580. There's a bunch of different home warranty companies out there. I will tell you, I have seen several houses lost over a home warranty in the last year being on the seller side. So just be aware of that $580 could cost your buyer a sale. It really could. Refrigerator to remain at no additional value. If you are asking for a refrigerator, washer, or dryer, they need to say remain at no additional value. Just make sure it says no additional value. If you don't put no additional value, then the lender must have a value to put on there, and it's a mess. You have to go find on Craigslist the exact same refrigerators and compare what the pricing is and take the average. It's a hot mess if you don't put that. So make sure it says at no additional value. You could put on there closing to be held with capital title at the law office of Brodowski, McCurry, Miller, and Maynard. Again, those are our attorneys in-house. That is not required. You do not have to have that in there. Okay, this is just things that you could have in there. This is one that you probably do want to have that in there. Purchaser to deliver earnest money to selling office within 48 hours of accepted contract. Unless you already have that earnest money in hand and have a copy of it and have it on hold at the office, you can put that in there. Because technically when you write a contract, you are supposed to have the earnest money right then. So if you don't have the earnest money, there's a lot of times, especially people that don't write checks a lot, which is a lot of people, you'll go and you'll see a house and they'll say, oh my gosh, I don't have my checkbook. I'll have to give it to you tomorrow. And you're like, okay, you need to put that in there. Purchaser to deliver earnest money to selling office within, you could put 24 hours if you wanted to, 24 to 48 hours of accepted contract. And you can also put, when it's summertime and it's an unoccupied home, I like to put that seller to maintain lawn through the closing of the sale. Because the first thing that people do whenever they get a contract on an unoccupied home in the summer is tell the lawn guy to not come back. So that might not be a bad idea for summertime to put something in there about that. Do not put that in there during January though. That's no bueno. That's not good. All right, so that's just a few of the provisions. There's obviously a bunch of other provisions. If they're going to be asking for personal items such as the John Deere tractor or the lawnmower or something else, the weed eater, something like that, that's kind of off the wall, then it needs to be on that personal property addendum. They also need to realize that that could cost them a sale if they're asking for items like that as well. Just so you know. At the bottom, you want to make sure where it says agent brokerage information, you want to fill this out. The salesperson, you can put your ID in there, your MLS ID and your license number. And then our MLS ID is 111900. And our license number, I think I always get it confused, but I think it's 91025 or it's 90125. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it's 91025. So you always want to make sure you fill that out when you are writing an offer. So does anybody, I'm going to open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions over any of the contract that I went over or that I even didn't go over? You can either type it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Nobody? Nobody has questions today? All right. I must have done a pretty good job then. No questions. The one thing that goes with the finance sales contract is the inspection addendum, and you do want that. On the inspection addendum, you want to ask for at least 10 days, 10 working days to do your home inspection. That's the only extra field mark that you have to put in there other than the buyer's name and the address. So make sure it says 10 working days. Working days is Monday through Friday, and it does not count holidays. So just make sure that you have at least 10 working days. You might even want to ask for 12 or 13, especially in the springtime when the home inspectors get really backed up. So one more time, does anybody have any more questions? You're welcome. Okay, how common? It used to be very, very common, but I think a lot of people now have realized that home warranties are not really worth the paper that they're written on. However, there's a lot of people that absolutely love home warranties, so they can still ask for that. They just need to be aware that if it's a property that has 8, 10 offers on it, I probably would not suggest asking for it, only because that could be the difference. I mean, I've had several times on the seller side that the only difference between the two offers was that home warranty. And that was literally the deciding factor, $580. If they want to get a home warranty themselves, you can order it and they can pay for it at closing. So that's an option too, that they can actually pay for their own home warranty at closing. So is it common? Yes, it's still common. Not as common as it was a couple of years ago, but it's still common. I would just be aware of it if there's a bunch of offers on a property. Anybody else?
I have a quick question. I just want to clarify on the home must appraise for purchase price. Does that only mean that the buyer would be responsible for the difference, or does it mean that the contract could fall through if the home doesn't appraise?
Correct. So that basically gives the buyer an out. So say the house say you're going to pay $250 for it, okay? And you put home must appraise for purchase price or greater, and the appraisal comes in at $230. That gives the buyer an opportunity to go renegotiate with the seller that says, okay, hey, the house only appraised for $230. I was willing to pay $250, but I'm not willing to pay any more than what the appraisal price came in at. And the seller comes back and has to drop their price by $20,000. If you don't have that must appraise for purchase price or greater in there, and they're paying $250 and the appraisal comes in at $230, that buyer has to come up with another $20,000 difference in price. I mean, they have to come up with that extra money because the bank is only going to loan as much as the appraisal. They're not going to loan any more money than the appraisal, right? So they're just got on the hook for $20,000, which would really suck. Really bad. Okay. So you put that in there so they can go back and renegotiate if it doesn't, or they can, like I had one last year. I put home must appraise for purchase price or greater. It was 280. The appraisal came in at like 240, which is ridiculous. And there were comps that showed it at 280, but the appraiser would not change the value on it. And the seller said, absolutely not. We're not taking it. And we ended up having to do a mutual lease and go find another property because of the fact that the seller just wasn't going to do that. So it gives the buyer an out to where they wouldn't have to pay that difference, that big old, I'm not saying big chunk. Sometimes it could be $500 short or something like that, but it at least gives them an opportunity to get out of it if they need to. And if it doesn't appraise. So, and as we're going forward with the market shifting and our pricing going up as much as it has been, we are going to continue to see some appraisal issues only because there's not enough comps in the MLS right now for appraisers to price based off of the area, right? So there's a lot of homes that sell before they even go in the MLS. And it's actually creating a negative thing for appraisers because appraisers aren't having the amount of comps that they need in order to increase that pricing as fast as our pricing is increasing. Yeah. So does that help?
Thank you.
Does that help answer?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question for that. So would that, I forgot what it's called. Is it a disclosure or anyways, I don't know what it's called, but by saying that that the home must appraise, is that a reason for a seller to pass over on an offer?
Could be. Yeah, could be. If you had 10 offers and the highest one, say you had one at 250 and it put on there home must appraise for purchase price or greater, and then you had one at 250 that didn't have any kind of appraisal contingency. As a seller, I would probably select the one with no appraisal contingency, but you need to be very confident. Number one, you need to be very confident in the number of 250 that as an agent, you feel like it's going to appraise, or two, the purchaser understands that they must come up with that money difference if it doesn't appraise. And it's okay if they do. Like I had one last year that was on my own listing. I listed at 360. The highest, so we had a $400,000 offer and we had a $402,000 offer. The 402 offer had home must appraise or purchase price or greater. My seller said, there's no way it's going to appraise. We're not taking it. The $400,000 offer did not have a home must appraise for purchase price or greater. And they took it. And guess what? The appraisal came in at 360. They had to actually change their loan amount to where they were putting a lot less down because they had to come up with that difference. So just be aware if that happens, they just need to know. Oh, you're welcome, Laura. Does anybody else have any other questions about that? Killing me with the chat. You're welcome. All right, guys. Well, I think we're done. We are going to have another contracts in March, and then we're going to have a follow-up contracts 2 in March as well. Contracts 2 goes over different scenarios. It'll go over contracts as far as counter offers go, how to respond to them, some requests for repair issues. I kind of let you guys drive that one, and I just kind of walk you through it. We just go over a lot more stuff in detail than we can go over in Contracts 1. Our Contracts 1 class is really just to set the foundation to teach you how to actually write a contract if you need to. So it's just kind of the first step. And then we go into more detail in Contracts 2. And I will tell you, take Contracts 1 as many times as you want, because I don't always teach it exactly the same. I think Nina's had mine a couple of times, but but I don't always teach it the same. And so we do have a couple of different discussions every time I teach this class. And so if you do have a chance to take it a couple of times, go ahead and take it a couple of times, or go back and watch a recorded version of it as well. That always seems to help as well. But it's a practice thing. You must practice before you can actually, you don't go out and learn how to ride a bike day one. You have to actually practice. Contracts is no different. You must practice writing a contract before you can get to that advanced stage of it. So it does take a little bit of a learning curve. If y'all need anything, or if you need anyone to look over your contract for you, I'd be happy to. I'm going to go ahead and put my information in the chat box. You can text me or email me. I'm better on text. You can call me too, by the way. You can always add me to your loop if you need me to look over a contract for you that you're going to submit. I'm more than happy to do that as well. So my information's in the chat box. If nobody has anything else, then I'm going to end the recording. But if y'all need anything, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to help. Y'all have a good day.